that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is an Energy Week Extra with Larry Sprague.
Yes, welcome. Thank you for having me, George. It's very thoughtful.
Larry, your business is called?
Yes, we are. I'm the executive director of the Sustainable Energy Funding Program.
Okay.
The Sustainable Energy Funding Program was formed with the very important assistance of the law firm of McGuire Woods several years ago, and it was formed as has been formed and is formed as a nonprofit organization, charitable organization, 501c3. And what we do is we have developed a network of investors, institutional investors, who are always looking for tax-exempt investment opportunities, and we funnel that interest into three areas that we'd like to see happen. And those are consistent with our mission, and those are renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable design. And as long as a project contains a component of those or all of those components, we can provide affordable, low-cost, flexible financing for those projects.
And how big are the projects?
The projects, well, in order for us for them to be something we'll consider, the minimum size is $2 million, $2.5 million. The maximum is about $90 million.
So if I wanted $2.5 million to use at my home, it would...
George, let me find the checkbook and we're ready to go. I mean, here we are. So,
I wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, we need a little bit more of a business plan.
Right.
As wonderful as the show is, I'm not sure it's worth $2.5 million, but who knows? We haven't seen the results of it yet.
Okay.
We haven't tried commercials yet.
Exactly. But the idea behind it, the rationale for its existence, is that we saw that nonprofits and public entities, which we can both serve, we can't serve, be very clear, we cannot serve commercial interests, but we can serve private nonprofit groups and public entities, tax-exempt entities, which would be a community, a town, a city, a school district, a church, a religious organization, a library, all kinds of things. And the idea there is that we found that the private sector, as efficient as it is, was we thought charging people more money than they needed to charge for the financing.
Right.
And we're experiencing that now with one of the key areas of our focus now is are called the property assessed clean energy programs, PACE programs.
PACE.
Yes, PACE. Now, we're involved in looking at several PACE projects in various different states in the country. And what we do is we bring a nonprofit funding strategy to those programs as opposed to a more commercial.
For-profit, which
right.
means basically, if you think about it, if an organization or a person even wants to invest a couple $1 million in a way that's going to make a difference environmentally, they could go to a bank and say, here is the money, invest it. Right. And the bank will take a profit off of that.
Yes.
And then the bank will go out and vet whoever it is that's going to borrow it. But what you're doing is you're putting as I understand it, you're putting the investor and the
opportunity together.
Yeah,
we serve as the vehicle. We are the vehicle, and we package projects together and say, for instance, we're looking at doing a PACE program for a large Catholic diocese.
Okay.
As we speak, and they have about 30 schools. And they are looking at potential financing that through a commercial entity, and we're also looking to finance it for them. We believe that we can come in at money that's less costly and more flexible, because our investors are not looking for the highest yield possible. They're looking for the tax-exempt advantage for their money, and therefore they're willing to accept a lower rate of return.
Which is basically still part of their yield.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's a balancing act, as I understand it, and so we present them with opportunities to lower their costs of money, sometimes 1-2%. It can be less, and that can be a significant amount.
Absolutely.
Also, because we are a not privately financed organization, when we do projects, there are some regulatory burdens that we don't have to deal with or abide by, and that can lower the costs of doing projects for municipalities in particular. So,
Right.
so we look at these entities. As I said before, we package the projects together. We're looking at in New York State. There are several communities that we're working with now that are looking to build workforce housing. Workforce housing is housing, as we view it, which is about looking at 80 to 70% of the median income of a community, and making sustainable, very sustainable housing, which would mean be state-of-the-art, low-energy use housing for workers who are looking to live as close to the work as where they work as possible. So that we're doing that in conjunction with private-public partnerships that we establish with communities to do that. So a community will say, we would like to make our community more competitive economically, and in order to attract businesses, we're going to provide housing for those workers that work there at a slightly reduced cost.
So this is housing for well-employed people.
These are positive for employed people's families, young families, other folks who are employed but are looking for a slight reduction in cost of living, so they're attracted to live closer to where they work. And this is seen as an economic engine for a lot of communities, and we're looking to do that in several places.
Sound.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these buildings, in order for us to participate in any project, it has to be state of the art,
Right.
As far as either passive house or other measurements of
Net
reduced
zero.
energy or net zero housing. Exactly,
Right.
something
Right.
like that would be something we'd look at. The other thing we are looking is just to roll off a few projects here, is that there are hydro facilities that exist in many communities.
Isn't that beautiful?
And we look to say to this, if it's if environmentally responsible hydro site, and you'd like to use its power for your own benefit, mostly behind the meter power, we can actually form a partnership with the community to buy that hydro facility. It therefore becomes a tax-exempt municipal utility, and we're able to provide low-cost electricity to the local community. And that also does is it not only makes it less expensive to live there, it also makes it a better place to do business. So you often see along the side of highways, I've seen them recently, where municipalities will advertise, we have the lowest cost of energy here. Come do business here, right?
Where have you seen that?
Oh, I've seen that lots of places.
Where?
Oh, in Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maryland, places like that.
Wow.
So
we should do that in Vermont.
So anyway, what we say is, hey, we'll take that. What we believe is that sustainability and the ability to affordably finance it, flexibly affordably finance it, is a real economic engine.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
that by providing housing, power, and jobs in a way that is sustainable is a real model for the future,
Right.
and one that will create prosperity for
Right.
us. And that's exactly what we're looking to do.
Right.
So this hydro facility I was speaking about earlier, purchase the hydro facility, renovate it, do whatever work needs to be done as far as bringing it up to code. And we're operational now, but we're looking to maximize its
Now,
benefits.
you talked to Lori Barg about this.
Yeah, Lori Barg is terrific.
I have never met her in person,
I've yet to do that myself.
but I've talked to her on the phone, and I'm writing articles for Green Energy Times. And one of the things that she told me was the number of dams. Another was the amount of power that is available for
Right.
dams in Vermont, just
Right.
in Vermont.
Right.
That were built for other reasons.
That were built for flood control
Right.
or other reasons. They're already there. The environmental changes have already happened.
Right.
If we undid those dams, it would make new environmental changes. But they're already there, and all you've got to do to get the electricity is install the generating facility.
Right.
And did she tell you how much power could be derived?
She did not. She told me that she was overseeing several dam sites in New Hampshire,
Yes.
and that she is also somewhat engaged in what's going on here in Vermont.
She did a study on these things for the Department of Energy,
Yes.
for USDOE.
Yes.
And I was absolutely floored when I saw the amount of power that was available. It was a big hunk.
It's significant. I mean, there's
significant hunk of what we need.
About 20 of those things starting from the Connecticut border, going up to the Canadian border,
Right.
along the Connecticut River on both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire.
But
And the whole purpose is to avoid flooding in Springfield and Hartford.
Right.
and that's just on the Connecticut River.
Right, right.
You know, there was this
And there's other dams all over the
all
state.
over the state. They're all over the place.
Yeah, provided they could be redesigned or upgraded to meet environmental expectations, which would be the fish ladders and other things
Yes.
to promote so that there wouldn't be localized levels of population extinctions related to the dam, and that the flow of water could in fact justify the expense in the investment, and there was the offtake. In other
Right.
words, we would look to partner up with an adjacent community or communities and say, if in partnership with you, we will provide 100% of the financing to renovate this existing hydro facility into a power generation facility for your community. And by doing so, we will seek to provide renewable energy at a very low cost.
Now, here's a big
Municipally
question.
owned.
Here's a big question. I'm going to ask you to expose yourself here to
I
all
don't. Well, I
kinds of-
think this is not obviously for children any longer. No. Okay.
if
Sorry,
a person
folks.
wants to contact you
Yes.
about this, for example, a local community or an energy
Yes.
committee
Yes.
says, "Wow, we've got a dam right here on the brook here, and could we?" How would they contact you?
They can certainly give me a call. I can give you my phone number if you'd like.
Why don't you do that?
It's 617-484-6771.
Do you have a website?
Yes, it's we can go on LinkedIn.
I will-
LinkedIn is a Sustainable Energy Funding Program in LinkedIn, and seffunding.org.
Okay.
I'm sorry, seffundingprogram.org is our website.
I'm gonna-
It's not a terribly impressive website, I have to say. I will admit that from the get-go. But I think the idea here is, I want to stress something, is that what we often find is that in order to make a project work, bringing financing to the table certainly helps, and in many
Right.
cases, projects are often starved with financing, of affordable financing or flexible financing. That's certainly part of it. The other thing I'll look at, frankly, is there a local commitment to this project happening? In other words, or are we just banging up against a door where there's not a lot of local? I mean, in other words, I would prefer in my work, it's much easier for me to begin the conversation with community leaders
Right.
and say to a mayor or a selectman or whoever it may be, a state representative or something that says, my community has been underserved for years. There's a hydro facility in my district. I am very interested in utilizing its benefit on behalf of my community. I think we could create a local renaissance in doing so, by creating a renewable source of power, certainly, and reduce the cost of everyone's cost of utilities there, and therefore attract additional business interest. That's the kind of conversation I'm looking to have. And the reason I say that is because I find myself involved in a lot of organizations where that's not the case, and we end up just going in circles.
Right.
And I need to avoid that, and my board of directors doesn't want me to spend much time on that either.
Yeah.
So.
How big a project could you take on?
As long as the project looks financially viable, up to $90 million.
90 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, what we look at is, what are we doing? Who are we serving? What are the finances? Again, our investors are not looking for top dollar.
Right.
So the rate of return is a modest rate of return, but it's a tax exempt.
The tax rate.
Yeah, excuse me, a tax.
They probably have a lot of money to protect.
There are some huge firms that we work with, and what's the goal, and what's the cash flow look like? So again, if A plus B plus C equals D, then we're in good shape.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that our select board here in Brattleboro came to the conclusion that it would be really nice to have every house in Brattleboro have its own solar power on site, if possible,
Right.
with its own batteries. And they said, we're going to put this into a pool somehow.
Right.
They could come to you and they could have a pool of loans? Would that
Now,
be
what would
possible?
happen is, in that case, what would have to happen is, it would have to be a project that was done through an entity in the community. In other words,
Right.
we can't serve commercial or residential properties.
Right.
But if the town of Brattleboro were to put together, let's say, the community solar independence program, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
And that
Remember that, everybody.
we would put together a tax exempt entity in partnership with Brattleboro and finance that project. And the ability for the community to collect any of the financing that's needed for that. In other words, there'd be, for instance, with the PACE program, going back to that, as I said earlier, that's a program that puts an assessment on people's property taxes, and they actually pay that to the community, which then pays us. If that kind of setup could be created here, we could certainly entertain doing that, yes.
So what we're talking about here is the kind of thing which to some small community in Vermont could be
Yes.
a very, very important,
Yes.
substantial.
There are a couple of things that might be opportunities to folks in Vermont here and other folks in New England. One is if a community wanted to have a community center and didn't have a community center and wanted one, we could enter into partnerships with the community to build that center using all of our financing, hold that center on our books, which means it wouldn't go as direct debt to the community, and enter into a long-term lease with the community to utilize that community center to their benefit.
And then what happens when the lease ends?
We transfer it to them.
For
$1.
$1.
$1.50, whatever it might be. Now, the idea here again is that there's a strong need for that kind of community center.
Right.
That the projects in the community themselves would generate some income.
Right.
And enough income at least to pay the operational fees, the maintenance fees, the staffing fees, and then the financing costs, again, which we all look to be modest.
Right.
We would design the building to be state-of-the-art.
Right.
Zero, net zero, passive house, whatever it may be, so that the building was very inexpensive to own and operate. The community would be able to maintain and operate that building as if it were their own. We could do that with a school. We could do that with a police station. We could do that with a fire station. We could do that with any community-owned asset or any asset that needs to stay community-owned.
For example, Brattleboro has just decided to move its police station to what used to be exclusively owned by the Brattleboro Reformer.
I see.
And this is a building which I think could possibly have solar power.
Okay.
And you could help provide for that.
Well, we could do, and I'm not suggesting this is what's going to happen here, but we could actually buy that building on behalf of the community, renovate it according to their standards, make it as energy efficient as possible, put solar photovoltaics on the top, put energy efficiency. Obviously, we're going to make this as airtight as possible so it's low cost, and then enter into a long-term lease.
Yeah.
With the community to utilize our structure that way.
Right. I want to explain to people who are watching this a couple of terms that we've had go by, because some people might be unaware of what they mean. One of them is net zero, and what that means is that a building produces at least as much power during the course of an average year as it uses.
Right.
And that production is going to be through whatever renewable energy means is used. Which could be on-site, it could be off-site, but it's got to be through a sustainable system. The other is passive, which is really kind of mind-blowing. What that means is the building has no need for really specifically heat. And this is fairly easy to achieve in Vermont. And in fact,
which almost sounds counterproductive.
it just
does,
sounds
doesn't it?
absolutely mind-blowing. But I've talked to architects and builders who say, well, 90% of the way to passive is easy. All you've got to do is have somebody working on this thing who knows how to seal it properly. I mean, you've got to put in the insulation, clearly, but the only special understanding that you need is the air sealing, and that involves ventilation and things like that. But 90% of the way to passive means that you only need 10%, and that you can pick up with just the addition of solar power. But what you're talking about is again, I think really kind of...
Well, what we're striving to do is provide capital,
Right.
affordable, flexible, nonprofit, tax-exempt capital
Yep.
to build the green economy.
And this, as
And
I
that is,
understand it,
that's been a challenge because I run into projects all the time that people have spent an enormous amount of time and energy
Right.
trying to create, and at the end of the day, the lack of capital caused the project to dry up.
yeah,
And that's unfortunate. So if we can bridge that gap,
right.
now certainly we can't do it in all instances, but we can bridge that gap. We are looking to, we would be providing folks with a service that is needed, and that's what we believe we're doing.
And you mentioned through all of New England, but I think you do projects all
Oh,
over.
we could, yeah, we're looking to do a couple of PACE programs, one in Louisiana, Arkansas, California, and Minnesota,
Okay, so
as well as in
This is-
Connecticut as well.
this is a program that you take all over the United States.
Yes, as long as it's, as again, I want to be very clear, we can serve nonprofit organizations, hospitals, school districts, tax-exempt public entities, towns, cities, counties, economic development authorities, industrial development corporations, community development corporations, whatever they may be, work with those folks and leverage our partnership with them to create the capital needed for a project. So what that does, it's one of the things that often communities like to do is they don't want to necessarily have to bond all the time to meet all their demands. We can provide them with a strategy to avoid those having to go out for bond all the time, and still maintain a financial integrity about the project. So the other thing I want to talk about a little bit about is the energy storage pilot program that you and I talked about a little bit. So I'll put the call
Larry and I
out to
had-
folks. Yeah.
Larry and I had breakfast
Yes,
this
we did.
morning, and
We did.
talked about all kinds of
Yes.
pie and
So one of the things that we're very interested in doing, and this is going to take a bold community to step forward to do this, is that we're looking
Bold
to.
enough, Brattleboro?
We'll see. Well, would be to create a system where we, through a partnership with the community, would place in every business and home a battery storage technology that would allow the community to draw power when it's least expensive during the evening, and then go off the grid and use the energy stored in the battery during the day.
So the whole town, in effect, becomes a battery.
The whole town, in fact, becomes a battery, and the whole town itself goes off the grid during the day. Now, at certain times during the year, that can be incredibly valuable to a utility.
Absolutely.
Incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
But the other thing is it reduces the cost of power.
That's
Yes.
very interesting.
So we could provide all the financing for this in a tax-exempt, nonprofit, flexible fashion,
Right.
provided we had a receptive community,
Yes.
and that they were looking to use sustainability as a way to make their communities more affordable and, frankly, more business friendly. Actually,
And you know, most people who hear this really probably don't appreciate why a utility would want this to be done.
right?
But the cost of power in the United States, there are parts of the United States right now where the cost of power, wholesale spot price of power, normally goes into negative territory every night. Or I shouldn't say every night, but commonly, night after
Which
night.
means they're paying people to take
They're
the power.
paying people to take the power.
Right.
When you take a megawatt hour of power, they will pay you to take it. And
Rather than shut their machines down.
exactly.
Right, exactly.
And these prices I've seen go into negative territory to the tune of $100 a megawatt hour, which is negative 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So a person who throws a space heater on, which is a kilowatt space heater in the middle of the night, if he could access those prices, would be paid 10 cents an hour to keep that, to heat his house. And
Sounds like a good deal to me.
yeah, and for a utility, basically what this means is, and that they are going to be paying people to take power they're going to be paying a negative price for power to the producer at one time of day, and then during the daytime when the demand is high, they have to charge very high prices. And the ordinary consumer doesn't see that swing because the utilities charge a fixed rate for a lot of customers, or a daytime rate and a nighttime rate, or whatever. And if you have customers who can store the power during the night and then use it during the day, or even deliver it back to the grid, there are two examples of this that I can think of. One is that utility in Dallas, which charges a little bit extra for daytime power, but you're allowed to take as much power as you want between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. for free. So you can charge your batteries at night.
Interesting.
And run off of them during the day, and you can have a house theoretically, which is just being billed for the connect charge. The other thing is Green Mountain Power has a program involving Tesla batteries. If you buy a Tesla battery for $6,500 and have them install it, which is all part of the $6,500, they will pay you 30 some odd dollars a month if they're allowed to take power from the battery during the daytime and recharge the battery at night.
So the deal is, if they're basically using you as their storage
system. As a storage system. And you know, if you think about it, storage is an expensive thing for utilities. I mean, look at the Northfield Mountain storage system. That thing had twice, when it was first built, had twice the output of Vermont Yankee. As its maximum output. It was a pumped storage station that was there partly because Vermont Yankee was being built. And the only reason it didn't have twice the power when Vermont Yankee was closed was because Vermont Yankee was uprated by 20%. But nevertheless, this was a way of buying power at a low price at night and then selling it at a high price. And in some parts of the United States, the low price is going below zero. And the high price is going to a multiple, in many cases, of retail. So Green Mountain Power buys power for 60 cents a kilowatt hour and sells it to you for 15. That's not a good deal for them.
I wouldn't think.
But if they can buy it from you for 15 and sell it back to you for 15 and buy it from you when the wholesale spot price is 60 and sell it back when the wholesale spot price is 5, then they're making money on both transactions, and that's something they like.
Well, the technology is certainly in place to make this possible.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the pilot program that I've just discussed with you is, there's beautiful technologies to allow you to switch from being on the grid to just locally produce power from your basement storage unit.
Right.
I mean, it's right there. It's easy. It's not. This is not no longer rocket science.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know what a virtual power plant is? You don't?
I don't.
Oh, I'm going to have fun telling you about it.
I don't know what a virtual power plant is.
There it is.
Is that it?
It's a computer.
No kidding.
And there are over 1,000 of these in operation right now in Germany.
Huh.
And what it is the computer regulates a power system. The computer knows what the weather is like. It knows the time of day. It knows the price of power. It knows the amount of power that's available on the grid. It knows what the various transmission systems can do. It may know that you've got a dryer in your house, an electric dryer, and it would be capable of telling that dryer, don't turn on just yet. The price of power is high. Wait a few hours, and then you can turn on when the price of power goes low. And this is not invasive in the sense that they don't care who you are, and they don't know where necessarily even you live. But they've got what's called a smart grid, and the smart grid knows, a few things that about you, including that you've got an electric dryer. Some people worry about that, but I mean.
So basically, they're picking up power from where it's generally being generated.
That's right.
And dispatching it to where somebody wants it.
That's right.
At that time.
That's right. Now,
and so the consequence of all of this is they're acting as if they are their own independent utility.
That's right. And what happens here, if you think about it, there's the old saw about the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow.
Right.
Well, the saw is wrong. The sun doesn't always shine in any given spot, but it does shine when peak demand is going on. But the wind always blows somewhere. And if it can't get the power from one wind turbine, it'll get it from another that's a couple hundred miles away. And the other thing is it can adjust the demand. So if the available power is low and the demand is high, it can adjust the demand down by typically turning off hot water heaters. And in this country,
and they're not doing this by brute force. They're doing it with your permission.
That's right. And in this country, we've got something like 50 some odd million water heaters. I don't know what does a water heater take. Is it about 2,000? Is it about 2,000
kilowatts?
watts?
Yeah.
2 kilowatts. So that would be 50,000 times 2,000. You know, we're talking about 100 million watts here.
Yes.
This is a lot of wattage, you know.
Sure it is.
50 million, no, I'm sorry, 100 billion watts. It's 100 gigawatts.
That's a lot.
It's
Too
the
many
equivalent,
zeros for my head.
it's the equivalent of 100 nuclear power plants.
Wow.
Maybe I've got my decimal displaced. Never.
You know, I don't have my cell phone with me, so I can't tell you if you're right, because I've completely forgotten how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide.
Believe me, on
So
this
it's,
show, we always forget.
That's my cell phone's over there.
Nevertheless,
So
what we're talking about is the equivalent of being able to turn on or turn off a bunch of nuclear power plants simultaneously, which can't be done with nuclear power plants,
Right.
because it takes them days to get up to temperature.
Well, one of the things that we're also very aware of is a lot of our financing is financing the transition that's taking place.
Ah,
Well, the transition that's taking place is that it's becoming increasingly apparent that building large energy generating stations is
Right.
no longer the call of the day.
Yes.
Not only is it not the call of the day, but it's just not proving as financially viable as it once was.
right.
So
It
there.
served us well for 100 years.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question.
But
And
the
so,
time is over.
Well, the time is over, and also if you look upon it, it's if you look upon, there's been a lot of discussion about, and there are certainly subsidies and policies that have taken place at the local and state levels that have promoted renewable energies, but the other energy sources have been very satisfactorily subsidized for many, many years.
And they're still subject.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So you have one subsidy versus another subsidy, so they're trying to compete. But once those, even with those subsidies, you're finding that some of the larger generating stations, the loan guarantees that the federal government is having to back for some of the power plants that are currently nuclear facilities that are being under construction in South Carolina is staggering.
Yes.
It's staggering.
Yes.
And it's in the billions.
Yes.
And so if you think about that, that's a loan guarantee, which means essentially that if the project goes belly up, the U.S. taxpayers come to the rescue and pay the difference there, because it's essentially if the project goes bankrupt.
Yes.
The creditors, the people who have invested, now go to Uncle Sam and say, okay, we want you to write us a check.
Right.
Which is crazy. But anyway, but that aside, I think what we're looking to do is create flexible, friendly financing that allows people to communities and nonprofits to participate in the greening of the economy. And one of the projects I just wanted to mention is something we're looking at quite carefully now and in discussions with in several parts of this country are the idea of vertical farms. And vertical farms, for lack of a better term, are using technologies that grow food 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, and sell that food. It's pesticide free. It's not organic, and what I mean by that is organic. The certification for organic, as I understand it, is based on the soil, the medium that you use to grow crops.
Right.
Since there isn't soil used in these facilities, it's not at this point certified as organic.
Because
so
it's hydroponic.
It's hydroponic, it's water, but the water is constantly recycled. There's not a huge draw on the local water supply to do
Right.
this. But the reason I bring it up is because one of the models that we're using is that in partnership with communities in which we are discussing this, if there are profits that are generated from these facilities, after maintenance and operation costs and the financing costs are repaid, we will take some of those profits and distribute those into the community to promote and finance sustainability within the community itself. So for instance, if the vertical farm was located here in Brattleboro, and let's say it made a profit of $100,000, $100,000 would go back into the pockets of Brattleboro to develop sustainability here. And that could mean, energy efficiency. You give away energy efficiency light bulbs to everybody. You replace everyone's water heater with an energy efficiency water heater. Weatherization, or solar panels where applicable, whatever it may be. The idea behind it is to create local food, which low carbon footprint to deliver the food, healthy food, and create a source of income for municipalities to promote sustainability. there's a lot of efforts to murky the waters, so to speak, so it doesn't seem as crystal clear as we might understand
Why would
it
anybody
as
want to
being.
do
Well,
that?
they're interested in doing that. I mean, I find one of the big challenges that we found is that there isn't a great deal of financial understanding about how money is used and how money can effectively. I mean, outside of people going for grant money and things like that, which we understand its value, but it can be very cumbersome. It can come with all kinds of rules and regulations attached to it. It doesn't allow you a lot of flexibility in many instances. It's not always free, and it requires a lot of brain damage. We are trying to reduce the complexity.
Yes.
By saying, here we are. It's simple. It's direct. It's working with you. Take advantage of the innovations that are there.
Tailor-made to your
exactly. Promote
circumstances.
Sustainability, promote energy efficiency
Right.
and renewable energy. That's
Right.
what we're doing.
So people who have got a sufficiently large or sufficiently small project could just come to you and say, here it is.
Yeah, I mean, we'd look at it if someone would have come to us and said, we would like to lower the costs of heating and cooling our schools.
Yeah.
Or powering our schools. So we'd say, all right, what would you like to do? And we think, well, maybe we could do a third-party ownership of a biomass facility. What would that look like? Well, we would look at your demand, and we would finance and own on site at one of your schools the biomass facility. We would hire people to maintain and operate it, and we would sell power back to you at a very competitive rate to reduce your costs of providing energy to your schools. Maybe use some of the off-heat to heat local buildings. The school district gets the advantages of all that I've just described, as well as the advantage of not having to spend their own finances directly on it. It doesn't come out of their capital budget. It could come out of their operating budget, which would be a different scenario for them.
Let me try a hypothetical.
Okay, fire away.
Let's just say that we want to build a plant in Vernon, Vermont.
Yes.
Which is going to be a wood burning facility. It's going to be wood gasification, so it's going to be very, very clean.
Okay.
It's going to use local wood only.
Okay.
And it's going to generate power, which it's going to put on the grid. It's going to generate heat, which it will pipe to the local elementary school, which is just across the street from the Vermont Yankee lot. And also the local municipal building and any houses that happen to be around there. Okay. But this is also going to provide electricity for heat pumps that are being used in schools in Marlborough, which is miles away.
Yes.
And in, say, Windham, the town of Windham, Vermont, which is miles away.
Yes.
And these three communities, or a bunch of communities, all come together and they say, we're going to do a project. And we want that project to benefit all of those schools. They could actually bundle that into a single organization, which would wind up functioning as a nonprofit.
Well, we would help them organize it.
Isn't that nice of you?
No, we would. We would, because we'd have to organize it so there'd be a collective buy-in.
Right.
We would establish what we would call, for lack of a better term, let's call it the Windham Gasification Project, LLC.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit tax-exempt organization. We've provided all the financing for it. We've done it in partnership with these communities.
Yes.
The ones you've mentioned and maybe others.
Others. Yeah.
And the purpose of
they
this.
don't have to be contiguous.
They don't have to be.
No, they don't have to be. They just have to be part of the. They just have to be part of the organization.
Yeah, and the whole thing can be put together in a single system, which is going to be an LLC. And then, as I understand it, after the lease period ends,
we transfer it back to them.
Each one of them pays 33 1/3 cents and gets a third of the.
Right. So the idea behind that would be to allow the project to proceed without having to be very cumbersome. We would obviously there'd be regulations involved because I think what you're proposing is the repurposing of a nuclear facility.
Well, it wouldn't be repurposing a nuclear facility. It would be putting in another plant at the same site. There's enough room for a plant. There's enough room for an entire new nuclear facility there.
Is there?
Yeah.
Now, what about the existing nuclear facility? Isn't that going to be?
That's going to go through its process.
There's decommissioning. Decommissioning will take 60 years?
I think there would be a lot of people who would appreciate the possibility of getting a job at a wood gasification generation facility that would be.
Well, if that's in the works, I mean, again, it's about local leadership.
It has to be.
Well, if it's again, it's about local leadership
Yeah.
and the ability to carry it out.
Yeah.
So if there was a group of community leaders that thought that was a good idea and that
Right.
it served the communities well that it was proposing to serve,
Right.
allowing Marlboro and Wyndham and other Scotney, maybe Vernon, maybe other folks to utilize the power and regenerate the economic opportunities that the plant once provided for people.
No,
At least in
part.
at least in part, we could certainly discuss that. Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
take Vernon for a second. Up until yesterday, there was an entity or a group of people in Vernon who were thinking very seriously about putting in a gas generation plant.
Okay.
That plant would have depended upon a pipeline being built in Massachusetts.
Yes, which has now
We
been
discussed
scuttled.
it on a show today.
Yes.
That's not going to happen.
Right.
So that means that gas plant isn't going to happen.
Right. It's off
At
the
least-
table.
So there might be people down in Vernon right now who would be very interested in talking to you.
Well, what was the motivation behind that? I mean, was because the power is
There were-
needed, or
I think more than anything else, it was the fact that, first of all, they had people who needed work,
right? Fair enough.
who had lost their jobs
Yep.
at the
And
nuclear
taxes.
plant. They had taxes, the income that they had lost. There may have been other things that they needed
other
to
factors
do,
influencing it, yes,
factors.
yeah.
But certainly one factor is they've got a nuclear facility which is being decommissioned that was originally designed to have 2 nuclear power plants, and the second one was never built. So they've got the room for that second plant. So there's Tom has suggested that this could be a site for a data center which would have power coming in, because the
They use
power
a lot of
lines
power.
are already there. They use as much power as a fair-sized
let me ask you
town.
something. The data center. That's interesting that you brought that up, because we have been approached about financing a data center that's been designed to be on a barge
Yes.
and to use the local
interesting.
water
To cool it.
to cool it, right? Local water to cool it, and use as much renewable energy as possible to power it. They're energy hogs.
Very much so.
But the idea behind that is that we've been in discussions about this, is that the off-takers of this data, we would first and foremost like them to be communities, counties, universities, hospitals. Try to provide them with as low-cost data services as possible from a innovative technological approach with an inexpensive format. And I don't know I don't know how responsive. I mean, I don't know what the relationship is with the power plant and the Connecticut River, but I know from what I understand, it took a lot of water out of the Connecticut River.
It took a lot of water. It heated the water up. It put it back in the river.
Okay.
And the water usage problem there was very largely that the river was being heated.
This would not happen to that degree at all.
Well, not to that degree, but if you've got a data center and it's producing a lot of heat, one of the things that would be very nice would be if in certain times of year that heat would be used to heat buildings.
Well, yes, by all means. I mean, we'd be open to that.
You know,
Again, if
and
that's,
remember also that if you've got heat, you can use it to cool buildings
That's
as
right, you
well.
can.
You know, this is the
that's right, you
absorption.
can. You can. Forgot
the
that.
absorption heat systems that it took me a while to figure out how these things work, and the idea that somebody actually sat down and invented that, I think is pretty impressive.
Isn't it amazing you can actually create cooling from heat?
Well,
I'm like,
you know,
wow, that does. I mean, to me, it just sounds wow, that's
the-
crazy,
the-
but it's great.
The little refrigerators they have in vehicles, you know, the campers and things like that operate on
They do exactly
propane
that.
or 12-volt electric. They do exactly that.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating kind of wonderful magic that they're doing, but. Yeah, of course, what they're doing is they're pumping that heat out someplace
Well,
else.
again,
It's
if
going
there's
into the
a
atmosphere.
way to utilize anything that's generated at this data center, for instance, to benefit the public good, we would certainly be interested in doing that.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
But you know, I mean, there again, if you put it in a place like Vernon, not only would you have the local electric facility being used, which is
So,
bringing it in,
I'm
but you could
curi-
also heat the elementary
I'm
school.
curious about this one situation. Now that Vernon is offline,
Yeah.
where does the power it created, where does that now come from?
elsewhere. It's,
There's no shortage.
This
It
is
just
what we've got.
bounces
It's,
around.
It
it's
comes
the
from
New England
coal
grid.
and hydro, and
No.
Mostly in New England, mostly now it's hydro, but not
Yeah.
all.
most of it's hydro.
The supply that we used to get about a third of the power from Vermont Yankee, and that has been replaced mostly from Hydro-Quebec. And that
I see. I see.
Now, if the state buys those dams that are on the Connecticut River and the Deerfield River, it would be able to supply itself probably with 100% of its own power locally in renewable power.
As opposed to rely on the dams up north.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I don't think TransCanada is going to end up selling them to Vermont if that's
Well,
the case.
no, they might.
They have no choice.
They-
Well, I wouldn't say they have no choice,
Right.
but they're going to sell to the highest bidder.
There is TransCanada the same as Hydro-Quebec?
Not at
I don't
all.
know.
I
Not
don't
at
think so.
all.
I don't know.
No.
Is that right?
Hydro-Quebec is a government entity.
My guess is that what would happen if we bought those dams is that we would have to sell the power to some other part of New England.
You wouldn't be able
While-
to sell it locally?
No, not initially, because we've got contracts with Hydro-Quebec.
I see.
Unless we could offload those contracts, which perhaps we could do.
Just wait till they expire. I mean,
you know, this
these
is-
aren't
yeah.
30-year contracts.
No.
They're year by year mostly.
Are they?
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah,
they
2
were
or 3
longer,
years.
but I haven't been up on that. And yeah, a couple of years. And basically what would happen is this whole thing would phase in to the point where we were supplying our own power locally.
It's certainly within the
And-
realm.
Huh?
It's within the realm of
Oh,
possibility.
yes, absolutely. And I think also it's conceivable that various communities along the river or elsewhere in Vermont could say, we want some of that as our community. We'd like to buy into this project. And
Well, it would also be great, and I don't know if this is possible here, would be to establish some kind of partnership where we would be able to buy one of the plants. I'm not suggesting this is going to work, and with the caveat being that power would have to be used in local communities. Now that may not be allowed by regulation, or the utility may not like that, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, and I understand that. But yeah, that would be an idea. I understand.
there are a lot of opportunities. And of course, there's a lot of things blocking a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely,
But what you're talking about is bringing money to the table.
yes,
And when you've got money, people can start getting inventive.
right.
So
They can take advantage of innovation.
they can take advantage of innovation, and the innovation doesn't have to be. Innovation is non-standard, so by definition, we're talking about dreams that
Right.
people can have.
Well, you can look at the technologies and say, how can we best utilize this to enhance our community's prosperity?
Right, and this is an interesting question.
Yeah, it is, and and that's exactly why we are doing what we're doing, in the sense
Right.
that we're trying to create an economic vehicle, a financing vehicle. We are the financing vehicle that allows communities and nonprofits to take advantage of the many green innovations that are out there to improve their way of life and to improve their standard of living and their competitiveness, actually. So that's exactly why we've been called into several communities within the last, I'd say, 3 months, into several communities we're in discussions with who embrace what I've just said. We need jobs, power, and energy.
And when
Jobs,
you address
power and
those-
housing, excuse me. So we're looking at that saying, okay, what do you have? Well, we have a hydro facility we'd like to purchase, renovate, create behind-the-meter finance of power for these workforce housing units, this incubator space for local businesses, this police and fire station, and we'd like to, so it's power, jobs, and housing. There you go.
Right, right.
Well, in today's markets, the electrons don't have to physically move from where they're being generated to where they're being utilized.
Right.
It can all be done by a bookkeeping action.
Yeah, it's true to a very large extent.
Yeah, it's
That
true.
I
happens
mean,
to be
they're
true.
not going to waste. Somebody's going to use them,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily the same electrons that are generated or used to be generated by Yankee.
And you made a point last week, Tom, that I thought was really interesting, and that is that power lines could be buried along the interstates.
Absolutely.
And
Any highway.
if you bury them along the interstates, it's more expensive than building them overhead, but they're going to be much more secure.
I mean, a factor of 100 to 1 maybe.
It also might be easier to service.
they're not going to need that much service.
Well, that's true. That's true.
I mean,
But you can anticipate the places in the lines where are going to need service and have
a substation there.
substations there that are available.
I'm sure that Green Mountain Power will tell you every well, it isn't Green Mountain, but it's ISO, I guess. Every fall during hunting season, they lose some insulators because some jerk sees it and says, that'd be a nice thing to shoot at.
Jerk. Pay attention, people. Jerk is the word here.
And these things are going to be, nobody's even going to know.
Well, listen,
they're
you've been
there.
out hunting all morning, and no deer has shown up. That
Nobody's
transition
gonna
looks
know
pretty
they're
good.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, as we speak, there's lines being planned to bring down power from Hydro-Quebec to the New York City metropolitan area, going through Vermont. And they're going under Lake Champlain.
Is
and then
that
from
the, what's
Lake
that, it's called the
Champlain-
Northern Pass, isn't that what that is? Is that Northern?
That's in New Hampshire.
Northern
Yeah,
Pass.
very similar program, though.
I see.
And it's a matter in Lake Champlain. These things can go bad, but it's not very likely.
So they would sit on the floor of Lake Champlain?
Yeah.
And then
Actually
when they,
buried
they're,
under
yeah,
the
they're
floor.
buried. And when they come out of the end, when they run out of Lake Champlain, then they're buried in the earth along highways till they come to a substation.
But if you think about if you think about the highway system in the United States, it's not a thing that goes from one place to another. True enough, Route 80 goes from wherever it starts. Where does Route 80 start?
Oh, the West
New York?
Coast somewhere. Yeah,
But it goes to San Francisco.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And that's
Starts
a
in New
line.
Jersey.
It's a line, but it's part of a network. It's
Oh,
not.
absolutely.
It's not a line that sits by itself with things that
No,
go
it's
off
a
of it.
network.
It's a
That's a
network.
good
And
point.
if you build a network of that type, you're going to be able to just have a computer that says, "Oh, we need power from here to go over there, and power from here to go over there." And they are building power lines now from.
The network was built with the population distribution
Right.
in mind.
Right.
True.
For the same reason that they need places for the cars to go, they're going to need places where the power wants to
Right.
go.
And if they built on that network, it would mean that actual power distribution would become a very different thing than it is today, where you're talking about, in terms of the physical realities, where you're talking about we need to build a line. They're building it right now from the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas to
San Diego, isn't it?
well, there's
What's
yeah,
being built now?
a transmission line is going from the panhandles of Oklahoma and Texas to Kentucky, where it's tying into lines that go to Florida and Georgia.
And what's the line carrying? Is that carrying wind energy?
It's carrying primarily wind energy from those areas out in the Midwest. But you know, these transmission lines, the line losses are so small now that you could, if you just have the line in place, you could go from any place on Earth to any other place on Earth cost effectively. We could be getting power from the Aleutians if that's what we wanted. We could put wind power out there and just draw on it constantly. The Aleutians is over 1,000 miles long, and it's a place where the winds will blow constantly, day and night, without abatement. You know, so we've got lots of opportunities in terms of transmission, but the grid that we've got is designed to take wind power from the Panhandle and deliver it to Kentucky, not wind power from the Panhandle, take it on, put it on a network that will ship it to wherever it happens to be needed.
Right.
And that's the point that I'm making. You could tie this thing into the interstate, which means
It would make sense.
you don't have stuff overhead.
Yeah.
Right.
And in after a few years, you're going to recover the cost of this thing anyway from the fact that you don't have to repair these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the power system in Germany is so reliable, or
it's all
it's part of the
buried.
reason, because it's all buried.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it makes things a lot nicer,
It's prettier to look at, too.
prettier to look at, fewer birds being killed. Birds are killed by electric lines far faster than they are by wind turbines.
What's the in Brattleboro? Does everyone have internet connections? And
No, everyone can.
Okay, good.
But it's not necessarily. I mean, mine is not a high. It's not a high speed. It's a DSL, which is high speed compared to what we used to have. But it's
is
not
that what's
high
in
speed.
Brattleboro right now? Is DSL, or do you have other?
Well, we
I
get
could-
DSL, we get the cable people.
I could
Cable
get
people give you
faster.
pretty
Whatever you
fast
want.
stuff depending
Yeah.
upon how much you want to
Yeah.
pay.
I spend a lot of time online, and I have not felt a need for faster than what I've got, which is not the fastest available.
Right. Right.
It's faster than I used to have. But you know what I used to have in the old days, when it was text coming in and you could see it appearing on
Right, exactly.
Those were the old days.
I'm sure there's still people in Brattleboro that are using dial-up, but
Not many.
not many. DSL is affordable.
It is.
It's-
It is. In
it's under
fact,
20 bucks.
when I upgraded from my old DSL system to the newer one,
Yeah.
which is noticeably faster, I said, "How much is it going to cost me to get this new system in?" And the answer was, "Oh, your costs will go down $5 a month."
No kidding. Yeah, how about that?
Hot dog.
Yeah, it's a good thing to check to make sure that you're using the most economical.
Exactly. The reason I say is because we've been asked by certain communities potentially to finance community-wide Wi-Fi. Nonprofit,
and-
municipally. Again, anything that we finance is in the public domain.
That's an idea whose time has come. We just haven't faced
well,
up
yeah,
to it yet.
well, but again, and as a nonprofit, we are, by practice and law, transparent.
Yes,
So any project that we're engaged with, anywhere,
has to be transparent.
people can look on the website, the project's website, and say who's being paid for what are they doing,
What's
what are
the
the time,
payoff?
Isn't
what are the
that kinda
timelines. I know it's very I'm very
Sounds
uncomfortable with it.
Sounds like socialism to me.
No, it just sounds like transparency, but it's a matter of building integrity into the project understanding. So that if we were to,
Right.
for instance, if we were to do a community center in Brattleboro here, which I've had very preliminary discussions about, that everyone in the community would know who's involved with it, what people are making.
Have
and-
you talked to the people in Brattleboro about the police and fire center?
We've had
at all?
discussions, yes. I think
So
there
they're
was,
all aware of it?
There's some, yes, they are.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
they are. And again, it may not meet the community needs, and it all depends on what they're looking to do and what kind of other financial
Well,
resources are available to them. And
I suppose from your point of view, if you can't deal with Brattleboro, you've got other people out there.
absolutely. We always want to help forward-thinking communities reach
Right.
their goals, and again, as I said earlier, take advantage of the innovations that are out there, because in the end, those innovations will help create a more sustainable economy and lower people's cost of living. And
Right.
if you can marry those together, if you can say that we're going to finance a sustainable future, and that sustainable future actually has real benefits as far as job creation goes, lower costs of living, cleaner living, the constituency for that will just continue to broaden.
Of course. I mean, there's not.
And the
what is
financing
the
vehicle that
downside?
we've created is very much focused in on providing the financing needed to bring a lot of that to the fore.
And the big downside of this is that you don't appeal to people who don't like transparency, so they're not going to.
Well, I think that the other thing about it is it's public and it's not. I mean, in other words, all the things that we do. For instance, the hydro facilities I've talked about us purchasing, that would be a municipal utility owned by the people of the municipality, or the consortium that you mentioned earlier about the gasification
Wood
idea
gasification.
in Vernon. That would be a community-owned power facility.
Which could conceivably be selling power to the municipal, to the.
It could be doing a lot of things, but
utility,
again,
which is then
yes.
selling
But
it
again,
back to
it's
the-
a municipal. It's not a
Right.
privately owned venture.
Right.
So the
Right.
profits that come, if there are any profits, would not be going into the pockets of, not necessarily this is a bad thing, but in our case, they wouldn't be going in the pockets of investors. We could have to find another way to
Right.
utilize those. So
Now we are
we
approaching
finishing up here?
rapidly
Wow.
the end of our hour.
it
So
flew.
I
Time
think-
flew.
Yeah, we actually
Time goes
started.
fast when you're having fun.
Yeah, we actually started a minute or two after the clock started. So
Okay.
Is there anything you want to finish on?
No, but just by saying that we are open to speaking with any municipal leaders, any
Yes.
nonprofit leaders who are looking to take advantage of the innovations that are out there to build the sustainability, to reduce their costs of energy, We provide flexible and affordable financing to them if they're looking to build workforce housing in their communities.
Right.
If there's an old hydro facility they'd like to utilize for the public good, for renewable energy and lower business costs. If there's a biomass facility that a school district would like to put in to reduce the cost of heat and power to its school buildings and doesn't want to have to pay for it itself, wants to have it held on our books, not theirs, so it doesn't look seen as a direct debt. We're very happy to work with folks like that.
Very good. Very
And thank you
cool.
for having me. Thank you, George.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
This is
Can I
fun.
give him one last pitch?
Absolutely.
Larry Sprague, Sustainable Energy Funding Program. Happy to work with you. 617-484-6771. Thank you.